Today we're going to be making this spatula that you see here. I'm going to go through the layout first, and to let you know, the initial board that you're going to be using at your Flourish class will be maple. It'll measure 2 1/4 across. It'll be roughly 1/2 inch thick, and it'll measure 11 inches long. The piece that I'm using here to demonstrate is smaller than that, and it's a scrap piece. The measurements themselves don't matter. In part, it's going to depend on what you find comfortable and useful in the kitchen. But roughly what we're going to do is we're going to come in about 1/3 of the way in, and we'll make a mark. And normally we would be making marks with pencil. I'm going to use marker today so that it shows up on camera. So I'm going to come roughly 1/3 of the way in. I've made my mark there, and I'm going to drop that line down. Roughly 1/3 of the way in. From here, I'm going to go about 1.5 inches longer than where I was. So this extends past about 1.5 inches. I make a mark, and we're going to drop that line down as well. So 1/3 of the way in. This is about 1.5 inches past that 1/3 of the way in. This mark is going to be closer to the halfway point. From the top, we're going to come in 3/4 of an inch. So that would be here. You can see this is 1/8, so 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8. 6/8 right there. So that's 3/4 of an inch. I make my mark up from the top there. So I've come down 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to then come down 1/2 inch. Correction. I'm going to come down 1 full inch from the very end where my handle is. And then from the tip will be 1/2 inch. Here. So, as you can see, I've come down 1/2 inch. I've come down 3/4 of an inch. I've come down 1 inch. I have come in 1/3 of the way. I have come in probably just under halfway. This space is about 1.5 inches between them. What I'm then going to do is from this 1/2 inch mark, I'm going to make a sweeping motion to the bottom of my 1/3 of the way in mark. Whatever sweep I think looks comfortable for the tool that I'm trying to make. I'm then going to sweep from this 1/3 of the way in up to that 3/4 inch mark. And then I'm going to connect that 3/4 inch mark make a straight line to that 1 inch mark. And I'm going to go ahead and use the ruler from my combination square to get these lined up. So there we have it. I've come down about the 1/2 inch. From a 1/2 inch down to that 1/3 of the way in, I've come up to my 3/4 mark. From the 3/4 mark, I've made a straight line to my 1 inch mark. And as you can see, that is roughly the shape that we have here. Our next step is going to be chopping away all of this waste, or sawing it away. We'll show you that next. In order to get rid of this waste, in order to get rid of all of this waste that we've marked out in black here, we've got a few options. For this part, I'm going to go ahead and saw this out. I could use a chisel. I could make a series of saw marks in and then chop it out with a chisel. That is much faster. and I will demonstrate that on this curved part here. Now, what you could use is a coping saw. The premise of a coping saw is that it's a very thin blade, it's almost wire-like, and that lets you make gentle turns while cutting stuff out. But given that this is a long straight cut, while I could use this, I'm going to go ahead and use a Japanese pull saw. This is called a Ryoba. On one side, it has teeth that cut with the grain. On the other side, it has teeth that cut across the grain. And the grain is this wood that you see here. These marks, that is the grain. And they're just a series of straws, like my fingers here, that are going up the wood. And wood expands like that in the grain. So if the grain's going up this way, the wood will expand and contract like this. These straws that you can see there are what carry the water up the tree. So we're going to cut with the grain down it to about there, and we'll get rid of that wood. Now I'm going to let the saw do all the work. All I'm doing is just pulling the saw across. I'm not pushing it down. My hand is way back here on the handle, just so I can let the saw do all the work. Also notice that I'm not on my line. I'm going to cut near it so that I can sneak up to that line to make the cut. So I've made the cut all the way down the line. I'm going to flip it. And then I'm going to go ahead and follow this line down to my initial cut. And as you get closer, you can hear it change in tone as you near that cut. And there we are. To remove this, I'll demonstrate that with the coping saw. You're going to start the coping saw straight across, and you're going to be gentle with your turns. If you turn it too quickly, you'll just snap the blade. Best of case scenario, you'll just snap the blade out of the frame of the coping saw. Worst case is you'll break the blade. Even that worst case scenario isn't awful. These blades are relatively inexpensive, but still, no one wants to do that. But we're going to saw across and gently make our curve in. Just like so. Next, we need to eliminate this waste, which will form the blade of our spatula, the scraping portion of it. Given my handedness with my vise, I've also drawn it here. And as you can see, I've darkened in. These are the lines of the grain. So what we're going to use is a chisel to just follow that grain and remove it. Again, it's just stacks of straws on the grain. And so we're just going to remove straw after straw after straw while following this curve. Now, in regards to the vise, I'm using this on my home workbench. What we're going to be using will be a wooden hand screw. And if you're just getting started off in woodworking and you don't have a workbench or room for a workbench, using something like a wooden hand screw and then being able to clamp it onto a surface such as a kitchen counter is an excellent way of getting started. And how would you go about doing that? You can use an F-clamp. An F-clamp looks like an F shape. You bring it close, and then this makes it nice and tight by screwing this in the rest of the way. With the chisel, all tools in woodworking are effectively just chisels. They're just it's just an edge that slopes in. That's all a chisel is. If you put two chisels back to back, you've made a knife. If you have a row of chisels, you have a rip saw. That's what cuts with the grain. If you have a row of knives, you've made a crosscut saw. That's what cuts across the grain. If you take a chisel and you wrap it around a shaft, now you've got a drill bit. If you make a big knife, now you've got an axe. If you put a stick on it, all tools are effectively a chisel in woodworking. So if we just push it, you can see we're going to take off that layer. Now we could just sit here and do this, but that'll take some time. So what I'm going to end up doing is using a slightly more aggressive angle to really get in there. And I will use a mallet to hog off that waste, whatever I feel comfortable. Now, the important thing is just don't bite off more than you can chew. So if you get real aggressive with it, you will make your blade that much shorter, but it is going to follow the grain. So if you find you're going in and you're going to cut where you don't want to, just lower the chisel, make it parallel to the grain, it'll cut less. Also note that as far as using the mallet is concerned, you can see my hand is way up by the head of the mallet, this being the head. It's not down here. I'm not hitting it like a hammer. I'm using this to give myself fine taps and fine control. And as you can see, I'm getting probably too aggressive as I'm now cutting on my line. But that's okay because I still have the same general shape that I want. Now that we've cut that, what we're going to do is just shape it now with a rasp and file and spoke shave. We've now clamped our spatula here using the big wood screw clamp to our table. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove this waste we're going to shape it with either a very large file, or in this case, this is called a Shinto rasp. And it's effectively a series of hacksaws that are in this pattern as you see there. Now one side will be rougher and one side will be smoother. There will be smaller teeth on the smoother side and much larger teeth on that rough side. So we'll take the rough side first to hog off a lot of this wood here, and then we'll go on to the smooth side. Now you can order these from Amazon. If you go to garage sales, you might find very large files like this, and same thing, as you can see, it's got a very rough side there that would take off a lot, and then a smoother side. Or if you go to your local hardware store, you'll find a 4-in-1 file, so called because it has 4 different sides. It's a flat side with a smooth flat, a rough flat, and as you can see here, it's got a bit of a curve to it. And then you've got a curved, smooth side and a rough curved side. You could use this as well. Something like this might just take a little bit longer given its size and how aggressive these teeth are. They're not nearly as aggressive as this rasp will be. But what do? Well, we don't have anything direct. We're just going to find an angle that we like. We're going to push it, and we're going to just follow that curve. So I'm holding this at a slight angle. I'm not going straight across it. I'm holding it at a slight angle like so, and taking it across here. Until I've made the shape that I want, then I can use the smooth side to smooth it out. And then when it comes time to make it even smoother, what I'll use is something called a spoke shave. As I mentioned, everything's a chisel, and this is no different. It holds. This right here is effectively a chisel. We call it an iron, though. It's not the blade, it's an iron. And it's held at a specific angle. So if everything's a chisel, if it gets held in a specific angle, then it becomes something like a plane. And then depending on the planes, you have different types. So some of the larger planes are called bench planes. These smaller ones that are held in handles like this are called spoke shaves because they're what were used to shave wooden spokes. And we're just going to glide this along at an angle to smooth out our cut. We do this so that we don't have to sand the wood. It'll leave us with a nice, smooth finish. We are going to repeat this process not only on the blade here, but then also on the handle, so that we take it from a square handle, from something that's square and angular. This still has sharp corners there, to something that's been rounded and smoothed over. So I'm going to round this part over using a spoke shave, and this is just an older spoke shave, but it's still the same. This is still the blade or the iron right there. And I'm just going to slide that down here at an angle. So I'm not taking it on the wood here. It's about a 45, right? It's not exactly with the grain there. It's not on that surface there. It's just on the corner at about a 45. And as you see, I'm going to make these little shavings. And effectively what we're doing is we're knocking off that corner. And then I'm going to angle it some more. So I was like this, now I'm going to angle it some more and knock off that next corner. And if you just keep knocking off the corners, well, then you round them over. You make a corner, you knock it off. You make a corner, you knock it off. do the same on the other side. The grain is going against me here. There we go. So sometimes the grain goes against you. So the grain has direction. Think of it as petting a cat. If I pet a cat against the grain, it fluffs its fur up. If I go with the grain, it's nice and smooth, and well, the cat likes that. And as you can see here, we've rounded that corner over. You can still see we've got sharp corners there, but we've rounded it over here.